Holy, you're about to take the bar, aren't you? And you're watching this because you're absolutely bricking it. Well, as abnormal as life feels for you at the moment, bar exam anxiety is 100% normal. All law grads feel it. In fact, if a law grad tells you any different, they're either lying or they literally have no idea what they've signed up for. So yeah, bar exam stress is normal, but that doesn't mean it has to derail your focus. So today I'm interviewing author and bar prep hero Fernando Flores of the Bar Exam Game Plan to help you yank that anxiety drip out of your amygdala and take a calm, measured, and efficient approach to passing the bar. Okay, Fernando, tell me about your experience taking the bar exam. How nervous were you, and at what point in your prep did you feel the most terrified?
Well, Thea, thank you so much for that very important question. I think it's a question that comes up in the minds of a lot of future bar examinees. And just to share off the bat with you, I actually took the bar exam 2 times. The jurisdiction that I took it in was California. So I am thankfully I passed it, right? And so I can share that.
Yay!
I ended up taking it in a time when our bar exam at the time was 3 days long. So for folks who have taken an exam before and it's like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, that's a long time, but we would go for 3 days back to back. And usually the bar exam happens at the end of July and end of February. So you are studying for several months beforehand. And it was in those several months before the exam, during the first time, that I probably felt the most nervous. And the reason why was because I'm a first generation attorney. I'm the first one in my family to even have had completed high school, right? And to have completed undergrad, to have completed law school. And after just, pushing through all of those different, challenges and barriers and obstacles that I faced to get to that point where I just graduated in May, and now I'm going to step into in the next days to one of the most difficult exams out there, the bar exam. That's when I remember feeling the most nerves.
So much pressure, especially being, as you said, first generation. Wow, intense. So what did you and other students do at the time to deal with your nerves?
So I'm going to share the experience of the first time and then the second time because it looked very different, to be honest. So the first time around, I didn't know what the process really entailed, right? And it's actually important for me to talk about it in this way because even though there's a lot of bar exam programs that help you with the substantive information, so meaning this is the information that you need to memorize, this is the information that you need to learn so that you can then showcase your skills in the actual bar exam and show how much as an attorney, a future attorney, you really know. That's one piece that's definitely important. But the piece that often goes not spoken about and that we really don't discuss is that exact one. How do we take care of ourselves in the pursuit of this goal, right? Which is a very important goal. Becoming an attorney, you can make a lot of impact, have great influence, really make a change in somebody's lives. And so if you are not paying attention to how the human you is experiencing this process, it can be very difficult. So the first time for me, it was just wake up. First thing I thought about was bar exam preparation. I go about my day, just thinking about bar exam preparation. I was eating, I was thinking about bar exam preparation. I would finish the day, I was thinking about bar exam preparation to the point that I started dreaming about bar exam preparation. And it's the weekend and you're thinking about bar exam preparation. You try to take a break, you're thinking about bar exam preparation. Like people who have been through it know, right? And I like to take a little breather there because you can just feel how in depth and how immersive this process is, right? And so if you are not able to see how the human you is doing, it can be counterproductive. And it was for me. I just became stressed. I became, just worried about whether I was going to be able to achieve this goal, and my mindset was not an empowered one. So I really, when I failed, and I remember that day vividly because I was with my parents. You know, I come from a low income immigrant background, and we got the news. It was the third week in November. You get it on Friday at 6 p.m. here in California. And when I opened it, you know, the notification, it said, because they give you an examinee number, you punch that in, notification comes up, and it's one of two things. Either this name appears on the pass list, right? Which means that you've passed the bar and now you're on your way to getting your license, or this name does not appear on the pass list. And my name didn't appear on the pass list.
Ouch.
And I was just
feel that.
yeah, I was so down, so hurt. Deflated is probably one of the best words. And I took a step back to really ask myself, am I gonna do this again? Maybe it's not meant for me. Like, you know, what am I trying to accomplish? Like, in my background, there's not, you know, there's only 5%, you know, Latinx folks who are part of the attorney field. And am I really gonna pursue it again? And I just took some time and I asked myself, would my parents give up? And the answer was a resounding no, they wouldn't.
Yeah.
No, they wouldn't. So I'm not gonna give up. So I took time to just watch the replay of what I did that didn't work. Watch the replay of what I needed to do to just really take care of myself. And the second time, I didn't let go of the things that brought me the highest levels of joy. So like exercising, spending, you know, some time with my family, taking time off, you know, during Christmas, New Year's, because now I was studying for the February exam, right? So making sure that my nutrition was like on point. You know, I reduced drinking as well, right? And it was a combination of all those things. When I took a holistic approach, that I really, really benefited, and I ended up passing, and I felt very strong about my performance the second time around. So that was my experience.
That is such great advice, because people forget that your brain is a flesh and blood organ, and it requires proper nutrition, proper hydration, proper sleep. You know, you're a social human, you need contact and connection with other humans. And a lot of students think they can just put their biological needs on the shelf while they study and live, breathe, eat, sleep, bar prep. And you cannot perform if you don't look after your essential human needs. So that, I love that story, showing the evolution from one state to the next is brilliant. So, all right, do you think feeling nervous or even downright terrified can go so far as hurting a student's performance on the bar exam?
You know, in the bar exam, and I've shared this with a lot of my own clients or with my listeners on the podcast that I have, being nervous is part of the process. And that's okay, right? Feeling concerned, it's part of the process, but it's how you manage that makes all of the difference. Because if you are concerned about something and you're concerned about it over and over and over again, that starts to become a worry. An unmanaged worry starts to become nervousness and anxiety. And, you know, anxiety can then really, if it's unmanaged, right, you start dealing with a lot more stress. And when you start dealing with a lot of stress and that's unmanaged, then you're dealing with chronic stress. And when you're now having chronic stress, which is unmanaged stress, and you're having that for a long time, you're now dealing with burnout, whether it's academic burnout or professional burnout, right? And the bar exam is this like in between place between professional and academic. It can be, you know, just as challenging as, you know, when I used to take trials, right, or do an appellate argument in front of the court. It was really challenging, and it required a lot of me, right? It can rise to that type of level, and it's definitely a step up from the academic rigors that you've experienced in law school, right? Which also requires a mental shift there, but we can talk about that later. And in you moving forward, if you become self-aware, right, and you become just really knowledgeable in those inner thought patterns that tend to bring you down, that's one of the best like just investments that you can make in yourself.
Right.
Because when that thought pattern comes in where you're like, well, I don't know that you should be doing this. Are you really going to pass? You might fail, and that F word keeps coming up, right? It's
the dirty word.
Yeah, exactly. It's really difficult to counter it if you haven't done that before in your life, right? And so that becomes the dominant thought. So how do you counter that? And one of the ways that's very effective is coming up with affirmations, coming up with mantras that elevate your mental thought patterns, so that you are not ruminating in a negative thought pattern, so that you start changing and rewiring what you believe you are capable of, right? Yeah. So I think that's the best way that I can answer that.
That's awesome. And building these habits in law school and in bar prep is going to serve you for the rest of your career, because I imagine a lawyer's career is just one long series of high anxiety, high stress situations. So yeah, it'll serve you for life. All right. So now that you've literally written the book on preparing for the bar exam, what's the most effective way to manage stress in the months leading up to the bar, aside from what we've discussed, lifestyle and positive mantras? Are there anything else?
Yeah. So definitely working on what's known as emotional intelligence is just essential. I'm not sure if you knew this, but attorneys tend to have like a high level of IQ, but a low level of EQ. And that's because we are not really taught these what's called soft skills. We have to be strong and aggressive and we're combative. And there's all these perceptions of what an attorney can be. Hey, I've been an attorney now for almost 14 years, and I've defied all of those things, right? Because I have intentionally worked on it in the past years. But in the beginning of my career, I try to fit into that mold. And so the more that you can take care of your, again, holistic self, emotionally, how are you doing, right? Like really being honest with yourself. Do you need a break? And having the self-awareness of when you need to stop so that you can spend time with your loved ones is one of the most important skills that you can develop, because that's also going to carry, like you mentioned, into your professional, just career.
Yeah.
Not letting go of the basics. We've already mentioned it a little bit, but sleep, water, healthy eating, exercise, those are essential. We're practically like your plant in the back. We're like a house plant, but with emotions. we need that light, we need that water, we need that healthy nutrition, right? And so I think it's essential for you to be able to also figure out how is all that going to fit into your plan. And that's one of the reasons why I call it bar exam game plan. The third piece that I would say is create your plan as early as possible and go back to it. Visualize it, right? How do you visualize your success? It's one thing no one does, right? But as we see time and time again, right now that the Olympics have been going on and that's been in the news and everything, it's something that Olympians do, high performers do, right? Visualize your success. How does that look? How does that feel? How does that sound? How does that taste, right? Visualize it, because if you see it enough times in your mind, right, you're going to move toward that goal. And when there's like a question, oh, should I do this? Or should I push a little bit more, in a healthy way? The answer is going to be yes, I'm going to push a little bit more, and then I'm going to pause, right? And so I think those are the other things that I would say that can, in addition to what we've already talked about, that can help you manage that stress.
Yeah, awesome. And another really important tenet of combating exam stress is actually just doing the work and being prepared. But, when it comes to bar exam and the way the information is tested, even the top students find it, going to the exam not feeling quite ready. So what would be your 3 absolute must-have habits for studying so that you are as close to prepared as you can be?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first one is developing a high level of diligence.
Yes. Yeah.
It's essential. You have to be diligent, which means that you're going to be dedicated to the goal. And right now we have a tremendous amount of distractions. There's like dozens of like social media platforms that we can be on, that we are on, and making sure that you make a plan as to how you're going to minimize those distractions during the period that you're studying is really important. That's one. Second, develop a support group. When times get tough, who are going to be your top 5 people that you're going to go to if you need to talk, and connect with them on a rotating basis.
Yeah.
Those are plans that I've effectively implemented with my own coaching clients that have worked, that have helped people pass, especially folks who are, dealing with very high levels of anxiety as the exam approaches, right? And then also, I think the last tip is, remember, there are no shortcuts to this. You're gonna have to memorize the law. And that's the best probably advice that I can give you and prepare you for. There are no shortcuts. I had to memorize as much law as possible. I had to implement as much of the law as possible in the exam. I had to become, learn it. And sometimes I see people not pass because they think there's a shortcut. They think, I'm gonna pay attention to what, these other folks who predict what's gonna be in the exam, and I'm just gonna study those, 5 subjects. Look, there's 16, 17 subjects that you need to learn for the bar exam, depending on your jurisdiction.
Yeah.
You gotta know them as much as possible. Nobody knows, 100% of the content. Nobody goes into the bar exam knowing 100% of, the entire bar exam world knowledge base. There's not one person who does it. I'll repeat that again, no one. But you gotta aim for learning as much of it as possible, and there are no shortcuts to that. So find ways that will help you achieve that high level of memorization of the content.
Which really speaks to what you said earlier about having a very detailed, fully fleshed out plan ahead of time that you keep returning to and keep seeing, am I on track? Do I need to accelerate? Do I need to spend more time here or there? And
I'll share with you that that's one of the biggest also challenges that specifically students who are graduating will face, because I would say 98% of students who graduate step into some form of bar exam preparation program, and they're given a calendar, right, that they are supposed to follow, watch videos, read outlines, take some preparation exams. But the reality is, for me, I felt very tied to that, and I didn't give myself the room to shift to the place that I knew I needed to go in order to succeed. Right? Which was doing more preparation under timed conditions. And in not doing that, it really hurt me, right? So, and it's because, I didn't know any better. I was just like, I think this is what I'm supposed to be doing, right? And so I also, I've worked on the second time around to not beat myself up about it and just accept where I was. And the second time I just owned, I didn't do what was necessary for someone with my background to accomplish that goal. That's who I am. That's what happened. I'm owning that.
Yeah.
I owned that. I felt very liberated. I was like, oh, I just need to do a little more. So let me start a little bit earlier than most. Let me step into my power the way I know how, the way that I've done, and let's do this.
Yeah.
And that's how I succeeded.
That's awesome. Okay, so now it's the last few days before the exam. What should students be doing? Not only from a preparation standpoint, but sort of in terms of managing their stress, literally like a few days out from the bar.
So let's say almost all the exams start on Tuesday.
Okay.
Last week in July, last week in February, it's Tuesday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Okay.
So we're talking now Saturday and Sunday and Monday. Let's talk about those 3 days before the exam. Actually, let's step back to that Friday too, because there's something important that just came up recently with one of my clients that I'm like, folks need to know.
Okay.
There's been a lot of shifts right now, and there will continue to be in the next probably year to year and a half, in taking in-person exams to remote exams. The remote exam was new last year, right? During the pandemic, people were graduating and there needed to be an option for folks. so that they can become attorneys. So that the majority of the exams happen in October when they typically happen in July. It was the first time that they were administered in October for the history of many jurisdictions, right? And so people were like, well, how is this going to work? And your camera was reading your movements, and there was like AI being used for the first time. And if you moved too much, maybe you were looking at, some information, but people moved and then they got flagged and they weren't looking at any information. It just created a lot of issues. So there was a big shift that hadn't happened before, right? That we just had to just kind of learn as we went. And a lot of my clients were just kind of keeping me posted and updating me on how the shift was going. And I was kind of working with them on like making other mental shifts as well, because taking it from home presented its own set of challenges for some folks who maybe live with a lot of family members who didn't necessarily have the space necessary to take the exam. It also created some other issues. And so, those are probably going to continue again in the next year and a half. And it's just going to be really, really important to always check what your jurisdiction's updates are in relation to those changes, right? And staying aware, right, of what does the exam look like in your jurisdiction, so that you can then, adapt your studying as closely to what it's going to look like as possible, right? Remind me the last part of your question again.
It was about how you can manage your stress in the last few days leading up to the bar exam.
So I was setting it up because one of the things that Friday, okay, if it's really important that Friday before the exam, you check whether your software is working fine, whether your just your test taking apparatuses, your computer, your plug-in cord, everything. Make sure that it's working fine. Because if it's not, you have that Friday business day to call and ask for help, ask for support, ask questions on anything that you need. And sometimes if you don't do it that Friday, at least that Friday before at the latest, I suggest doing it earlier on. But also Friday is good because it's close enough to the exam that you're checking it right before, right? And you have time to connect on it. If you don't do it, then the weekend's gonna come by. You're gonna be worried about that. And then Monday, the day before the exam, you're gonna have to be dealing with that.
Instead of calming down and preparing,
Exactly. So that's one thing that I recommend on Friday that came up. There was actually an issue that I had to step in and help one of my coaching clients with. Then on the weekend, it really is about doing the thing that you need the most help in and support in. And what I mean by that is, if there's 2-3 subjects that maybe you haven't, necessarily gotten, it doesn't mean it's too late for you to get them, right? And I ended up learning, I remember property has a very intense mortgages section in it. And I was like, I didn't have a mortgage at the time. And I was like, what, how does this work in foreclosures? And I just took time, I slowed it down, I was patient with myself, and then I learned it. And when I came up in the exam, just a few days before, I had gotten the substance of it, and it helped a lot, right? And so I tell folks, it's okay if some things don't start clicking until the end. That's okay. Right? And so, and then Sunday, Monday, it really is up to each person, right? There's some people that feel really nervous leading up to the exam. And so it's about you doing what helps you stay centered, grounded, empowered, powerful, and some people feel like looking at their attack outlines that summarize all the subjects really helps. And that keeps them centered, grounded. Some people will take, practice questions. That helps them keep grounded. Other people will go to a spa, get a massage, and exercise and watch a movie. And that helps them stay really grounded. I've seen those three approaches work.
Mm-hmm.
There's no right or wrong approach right before. You just have to know yourself. You just have to know what you need in order to stay centered, grounded, empowered, so that you can do your very best.
Yeah.
The energy that it requires to take the exam is very high. So just make sure you have enough energy for those days, right? You don't want to deplete yourself before the Super Bowl. You want to perform during the Super Bowl at your highest caliber. So give yourself that opportunity.
And that's why in the final weeks leading up to the exam, we always recommend that students really start focusing on their physical well-being, because it is a marathon, as you said. 2-3 days of exam writing, of extreme cognitive burn overload. You have to be well hydrated, you have to get sleep, you have to eat properly so that you can perform as an athlete, as an endurance athlete, mental endurance athlete. So don't be partying late, no tequila Tuesday, none of that. All right, so tell me, how can your book, podcast, and prep program, The Bar Exam Game Plan, help law students take on the bar and prepare for a successful career in law?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking that question. And I think what the Bar Exam Game Plan does, it just helps you think through every part of the bar exam so that there is nothing left unchecked. So in the Bar Exam Game Plan program, which is a 5-video series that's available on barexamgameplan.info. What happens is I cover the 3 parts of the bar exam that every bar exam has, which is the essays portion, the multiple choice, and the performance test, and how to succeed in each part, so that you're not worrying about, what's my approach going to be to each of these parts of the exam. You will have an approach to tackle each part of the exam, right? This isn't the what. This isn't what the other programs are teaching you about the substance, right? We talked about that earlier. This isn't the substance. This is the how.
The strategy.
How to be an awesome bar examiner. How to be an awesome bar exam tester. Yeah. That's what I'm teaching, right? And the book covers that in also in more detail, but it's just focused on the strategies for each part of the exam.
Yeah.
And then I highly recommend that everybody check out the podcast. If you haven't checked out just the Bar Exam Game Plan podcast, go check it out. I have over, I think, 435 episodes, over the course of the past years. And you can learn about those changes and shifts that happened even last year. It's all recorded, right? It's all there. Yeah. If you want to understand what students were going through, because as soon as I get a question or a concern, I share it.
Yeah.
And so it's all there in the podcast. Yeah. Not only that, I also cover, I don't do this in the book or in the program, but I do in the podcast. I cover substantively what I call these big picture summaries for all of the subjects, right? And so I think it was February 2021 where from February 1st to February 16th, 17th, or 18th, every single day, I published a summary of the subjects. So, that's been incredible. Those are some of the most popular episodes because people just want a big summary, like how does this work? And then I also provide a practical approach from an attorney as to how it really looks like out in the field. And, I've covered nutrition tips in there. I've covered, mindset tips. I provide bar exam affirmations. If you don't know what an affirmation is, you can listen to the episodes, implement it as your own. I've talked about, the kinds of ways that you can take care of your hands, your forearms, your lower back, your neck, your shoulders, to ensure that, you're sitting so many hours. Just make sure that you know how to take care of yourself as well in those ways that no bar exam program is talking about. So that's how it can help.
So if you're in law school, start listening to a podcast today. And by the time you get, third year, by the time you get to the bar, you'll be like expert, on how to look after yourself. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been so valuable. My God. I mean, I'm actually going to check out that podcast. It sounds so interesting. As somebody who works from a desk all day long, I could definitely do with some of that advice. Yeah. If you've been quaking in your boots until this point, and I suspect you have if you've been watching this whole video, then I hope you now feel like you have a better toolkit to cope with stress and anxiety. Remember, nothing beats solid preparation and good study habits as far as combating exam stress is concerned. But you should also make time for exercise and social connection and a healthy lifestyle. We've also written a whole guide on this, on coping with bar exam stress. So check that out in the Brainscape Academy. And we've got another video on the main YouTube channel about how to use anxiety to actually enhance your exam performance. So pop on over and check those out. Finally, for more hands-on assistance preparing for the bar, go to Fernando's website and podcast, The Bar Exam Game Plan, details provided below. If you're in law school or preparing to take the bar exam, you should really get Brainscape certified MBE flashcards in your corner. This collection contains over 2,600 adaptive flashcards that will drill you on the key concepts you'll probably find in big bar review courses like Barbary or Themis, but condensed down to a super efficient flashcard format that helps you study more efficiently with spaced repetition. And whether you're in law school, just trying to keep your head above water, or preparing to take the biggest exam of your life, these can be a real lifeline to helping you get the content down pat. Brainscape also has a law academy packed with helpful guides on topics you'll no doubt be familiar with, like dealing with bar exam stress, studying for the bar, acing law firm interviews, and making key decisions like picking a bar review course and a law specialty as you embark upon your career. So grab these tools, study hard, and rise to your challenge.